The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Picard called Mercy. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and be sure to leave us comments wherever you find us. We'd love to hear from you. I want to tell you about another show on the network that you're sure to enjoy. More than a show, it's an opportunity for prayer called Pray Station Portable. It's the Liturgy of the Hours, or the Divine Office of the Church, in convenient audio form that you can pray along with. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or at sqpn.com/PSP. Before we talk about Picard, I just want to mention something that's come up, which is that Paramount Plus has a new version of Star Trek the Motion Picture available, which has
now even less boring, maybe.
Apparently, well, they've got new visuals. They've redone some of the color correction, but also they've redone some of the special effects, and I think they've edited it a little differently.
That was never the problem. The special effects and the colors and that was never the problem with Star Trek the Motion Picture.
No. I haven't seen it myself, but some people said they have edited it a little differently too, so that it's not quite as
it's the director's cut, the director's cut of the director's cut, or
the director's cut did improve. So a number of years ago, they came out with a recut version that was better than the theatrical version. So we didn't spend 7 minutes visually touring the exterior of the Enterprise in space dock.
Yes. They I'm trying to look at what exactly they changed, but whatever. It's in 4K. That's that big element of it. So now you get the big.
It looks prettier.
It looks prettier. 4K, yeah. But yeah, just I thought I'd mention it because it's Star Trek news. So we're talking about Mercy. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of Mercy?
Last time, Fox Mulder arrested Guinan and Picard. This time, he takes them to his FBI basement room and interrogates them. Picard reveals the truth about his plan, but only after a confidence-building exercise with Mulder. It turns out that Mulder, has been on an alien hunting quest since he was a boy because aliens took his sister Samantha. Because he encountered Vulcans in the wood while looking for his dog. Now that Picard and Mulder trust each other, Mulder both suddenly gets fired from the FBI and lets Picard and Guinan go. Guinan also reveals to Picard that Q finally showed up, and she discovered he was dying, and that everything that's happening is somehow due to that. Q also has given Adam Soong's clone daughter Kore the real antidote for her condition. She takes it and walks out on her fake father. Queen Agnes shows up and makes a deal with Soong. If he helps her get the materials she needs to start assimilating people and stop Picard and the Europa mission, she'll leave Earth and let him become the father of Earth's dystopian future. Meanwhile, back at La Sirena, Crystal Ball and Teresa are getting romantic, and they even kiss. He then discovers that the transporter is locked with a Borg interrupt code. When he reports this to the rest of the gang, they realize that Queen Agnes will be coming to try to take over La Sirena so she can get off the planet. And she won't be coming alone. That turns out to be true, as the last thing we see is Queen Agnes starting to assimilate a bunch of ex-Special Forces military personnel to aid in the assault as her new collective. The end.
So, if only the La Sirena was a spaceship and could fly to where they are and pick them up. Anyway, that's getting ahead. One interesting thing is, I know it's a coincidence, but it is fascinating to me that the episode Mercy came as we were heading into Divine Mercy Sunday. I just thought that was a fascinating little coincidence. I'm sure it has nothing. It was not planned or anything. Anyway. So yes, we get this scene, this opening scene, this teaser of the boy running through the woods in the dark and running from something, falls, picks up his flashlight, and these Vulcans are standing right there, sort of a la Star Trek First Contact. And so we have that, and then we'll come back to revisit that later because we don't know who the kid is at this point or anything like that. So by the end of the episode, we realize it's Agent Wells, aka Fox Mulder. We're in the present, quote unquote, present time. Wells has got Picard and Guinan, and he's convinced they're aliens who've come to sabotage the Europa mission, and it tells them that they're not on the official books. He's got them in this basement room, and they're not in the system. They're not,
Yeah, I like how this episode illustrates the fact that Guinan is from a race of listeners, meaning she's very, very observant.
Yes.
And this episode really highlights that fact more than any other Guinan episode before. I mean, not just in this, but in Next Gen as well, because she repeatedly picks up on things that Agent Wells is not saying. Like she's sitting in the room and she says, so this is a really off the books operation, isn't it? We're here in a basement, not in an office. That camera over in the corner isn't even hooked up, and you haven't done the following. And she deduces from her powerful observation skills that there are no records being made of this meeting. This is really off the books. And he confirms that that's true.
Right. And even as Picard is denying this as this crazy story, and then Wells plays hands the transcript of Rios's confession, quote unquote, from the ice lockup of what's really going on. And it wasn't a confession as such.
Yeah.
Rios
just told the truth, assuming no one would believe him.
Yes.
Right.
But they got it on tape.
Including cranky old admiral or something.
who's sort of a robot now.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Some kind of robot now. So I thought that was interesting. Well, let's talk about this Wells thread of the story, because we jump back and forth throughout.
In my notes, I actually divided it into the different plot threads.
Yeah.
I find that easier than trying to keep track of everything in chronological order.
So Wells separates Guinan and Picard, which is the normal sort of thing you're supposed to do from the beginning. And I'm not sure why he didn't separate them from the beginning, but that's for story purposes. But he ends up separating her. And then another FBI agent comes in, quote unquote, and it turns out to be Q, and posing, wearing FBI garb. And he remembers her, but she hasn't met him yet. So this is Q from the 25th century, 24th century.
Right.
I can never keep
25th now.
25th now. Yep. Okay. And she, using her perception skills, like you mentioned, senses emptiness and fear in Q, which she then realizes is him dying. And we have this interesting conversation about death. Because first Q, he's as confused as anyone else.
Because writers love conversations about death.
They do. And he confesses that at first he didn't realize that Q could die, but he's kind of excited by this because eternal existence is kind of boring for him, I guess. And this kind of reminded me a little bit of the end of The Good Place, by the way.
Oh, okay.
This idea of the eternal existence gets boring.
The lame ending of an otherwise great show.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. What it reminded me of was Silence of the Library and Forest of the Dead from Doctor Who, because when they go there at the beginning of the first episode of the two-parter, Noble is asking the Doctor, so we're on this planet that's just one big library. It's got books on everything. So what's your favorite section? And the Doctor is talking about the biography section, and she's like, oh, great. Yeah. A death on the last page of every book. And the Doctor makes this speech, which sets up the themes that will be explored in the two-parter about death gives life scope and meaning. And if you don't have a death to define a life, then it has less meaning. And so Q is excited now that had been excited at the prospect of his death, because now that he has a finite amount of time left, he's wanting it to give him purpose instead of just being an immortal dilettante that, is just a wastrel that does nothing and has no purpose. Now he can have a purpose since he's got a finite existence. Only it hasn't worked out that way for him. He's still unsatisfied because he's been waiting for his purpose and it hasn't shown up.
Right. It sort of reminds me of that Voyager episode where they visit the continuum and it's a bunch of people sitting around doing nothing because it's eternity. Why do anything?
At a gas station in the desert.
Right. He says he felt at first like he was on the threshold of the unknowable. And it was something new after an eternity of existence. But now it just feels like he's fading into nothing because he's not been given a purpose, which makes you wonder who's giving the purpose.
Yeah. He repeatedly snaps his finger at Guinan and says, "I'm literally trying to annihilate you."
Right. And then he says this experiment that is ongoing in this season on Picard is his last act. And I'm thinking, is it his attempt to find meaning? And does meaning come with a finite lifespan? Is that
no,
weird?
That's just a TV myth.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like he's trying to say that's what meaning comes from, finality and ending. But, as we know from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, that's just a chapter ending.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's just the end of the preface. When there's much more meaning to come. Then
Q also says dying stars burn brighter. And I'm like,
depends.
Do they though? I mean, really?
It sort of depends.
They on the main sequence they get bigger, and they get the like our white dwarf sun will eventually become a red giant, but bigger doesn't mean brighter. It's actually going to be cooler.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that it bothers me a little bit, by the way, but with this Q is he seems to be able to do all kinds of things that a regular human being wouldn't be able to do, yet like sneak into the FBI place, make this cure for Cory, yet he doesn't have his powers. So how is he doing this?
I think those were done before he lost his powers.
Okay.
I think he set it up, and he's only very recently. I mean, we saw him
when he realized
I can't do this, and for the first time, and he already had a lot of arrangements in place.
Well, I can also see, he can be very persuasive. He's got literally an eternity of experience of trying to persuade people to do things. So yeah, I mean, and it's not that it wouldn't be that hard for him to try to figure out how to get a FBI jacket and badge or something like that. So I mean. Yeah.
And he also, with his IQ of 2000, comes up with really innovative solutions, like just change the gravitational constant of the universe.
Right. I remember that. It would be interesting, like a series of audio stories, like a la Big Finish, of just powerless Q adventures, where he just has to go on his wits and knowledge to do things. That would be kind of interesting. So Guinan and Picard are put back together again, and they realize that Wells, the agent, is they say a haunted man stuck in the past.
Which leads them to his boyhood experience in the woods. But first, I wanted to note something about the threat that Agent Wells poses to them.
Okay.
Because we kind of skipped over that part and went to the Guinan stuff. But the thing is, so he's a government agent. And Picard realizes we have to convince him, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, we have to convince him that we're not a threat to the Europa mission. It's not going to be enough to just deny stuff and claim we're not aliens, because as long as he thinks we're a threat, if all he has to do is, and Wells points this out, all he has to do is call NASA and tell them there's a threat, and they will scrub the mission.
Yeah.
And so Picard and Guinan need to not just convince him they're innocent. They need to convince him the mission is safe, because otherwise it'll be scrubbed and history will be off course.
Right.
Also, he picked up Picard's communicator that he lost last time, and he sends it off to be analyzed. And he says, "How long do you think it'll be before my guys determine that thing is not Earth tech?" So the threat is really big here to Earth's history. There are multiple ways the timeline can get off course right now.
Right.
And I like that as a dramatic element. They've got to work harder. They somehow have to convince this guy the mission is safe. And the way they ultimately do that is by the trust building exercise, where and the thing that sets up the trust building exercise is interesting, because Guinan at this point is still in the other room, and she manifests to Picard and Agent Wells as a living apparition, which is a real thing. In fact, in parapsychology, back in 1886, there was a 2-volume study done by the British Society for Psychical Research on phantasms of the living. And you can see she's really straining to do this, and she's even bleeding from her nose a little bit, but she's in her locked up in her room after she's had her conversation with Q that turned on the fact that humans are all stuck in the past, and she realizes that's a significant line. She needs to communicate that to Picard, and she forces herself to manifest as a living apparition to tell Picard that all humans are stuck in the past. And that gives him the clue he needs for the trust building exercise, and says, look, you tell me a truth that you've never told anybody before, and I'll tell you the truth too. And that's when Agent Wells tells about meeting aliens in the woods. And he doesn't know they're Vulcans, of course.
Right.
He knows that the Vulcan put his hand on his head, on the young Agent Wells's head, in what we would recognize as a mind meld. But he didn't know that's what it was, and he interpreted it as some kind of psychic attack or something, or
even a physical attack,
and then the Vulcan beamed out in the middle of it, because that's just when his ship happened to grab him. And so he didn't get to complete the mind meld, and boy Wells never learned what it was. And so he's been perceiving aliens as a threat his entire life, and has gone on a very much Fox Mulder-like journey. In the FBI, where he is ridiculed, and he's got this basement room that he has access to. It's not properly his office like Fox's is in the basement, but he's doing this off the books things because it's not authorized.
I wonder if the other agents call him Spooky Wells.
Yeah, exactly. Or H.G. Wells. Hey, H.G., how's it going? But after he reveals that, Picard says, so show me how he put his hand on your head. And Wells puts his hand on Picard's head, on the top of Picard's head, palm down, and says he was pressing into my head with his fingers and stuff. And Picard says, are you sure he didn't do it this way? And Picard puts his hand on Wells's head in the mind meld gesture. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's what he did. And Picard says, he wasn't attacking you. That was a mind meld. He was trying to erase your memory so you wouldn't be burdened your entire life by this memory of having met aliens.
I like the fact that they have the child in the traumatic event doesn't remember perfectly what happened. We see it because it's a TV show and they show us the event. But in reality, your childhood trauma of that moment would twist it and show how it kind of shows how unreliable eyewitness testimony is in general, and that he doesn't remember exactly how it was, and until he gets it, was it more like this, and then and sort of unlocks the real memory of how it actually was for Wells. So I liked that.
Well, I think many of us, we look back at incidents from our childhood, whether it is, our general how our lives were as a child, or, a tragedy like this, and we see things very differently than maybe how they really were. I can think back in my life, we lived, fairly poor for much of my childhood, but I didn't remember that. I had no clue. So it's the same thing, again, a tragedy where a child might not completely understand what was going on.
Right. And it affects him his entire life because of that. And
it's also possible he could remember, but he was exaggerating to communicate to Picard the drama of the situation from his point of view. And Picard corrects him on that exaggeration.
Right.
So then that's when Picard admits who he is and what he needs from Wells. And then we have this scene where Wells admits, I'm letting you go. I never actually put you in the system. I never sent your communicator off. I've been fired, and so I'm not going to keep you around.
Yeah, so why did he get fired just now? That just kind of comes in out of nowhere. Why does he need to be fired? You know, he could just let him go.
Yeah.
So wasn't sure about that. It seems a little coincidental. The one other thing that we learned that's significant from this kind of plot line within the episode involving Q and the FBI agent and Picard and Guinan is that that Q said, well, Guinan in talking to Q said, you know, why have you set this trap for Picard? And Q said the trap is irrelevant. It's the escape that's important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to have some kind of payoff.
Right. Then Guinan also says around this point when they get let go is she says, humans are different because when they're broken, it stays with them, motivating them to deal with it and evolve. And I'm like, once again, we have the humans are just better than everyone else in the galaxy.
Humans are so special. I know. It's like, okay, remember the Copernican revolution?
Yeah.
Let's try to not make it all about humanity.
Yeah. We're not the center of the universe. It kind of bugs me a little bit with that Star Trek does this. Is with the it's
and
a
Babylon
big galaxy.
5 does it. Babylon 5 does it too. I mean, my Minbari people and the other races would never build a station where we could get together and have diplomacy and commerce.
Right. Yeah. So
if you want to see more of that, just go to the Reddit forum, it's HFY, humans F yeah. You know, there's lots of fan fiction there about how great humans are.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
But before we leave Wells, I want to mention, you know, last week I said that, you know, Jay Carnes, who played Wells, also played Lieutenant Duquesne of the USS Relativity on Voyager, and I think I can't remember if both of you agreed or one or the other that they had a good opportunity here where they could have pulled that character back in, and they missed it. Yeah, they completely whiffed on it. Now, it's not to say that they can't double back on it. They can, you know, they could come back, you know, next episode and say, oh, by the way, I told you a lie when we were down in that room. I really was not from the 20th century. I did not see Vulcans in the 20th century. I'm actually from. Do I think they're going to do that? No. I'm not convinced that they have that awareness to say this would be such a great plot line to have this actually be that Lieutenant Duquesne going, yeah, I came back because we saw this time shift and I came back to help you.
I think in one way that might be a mistake because you've already got the Watcher, you've got Q, there would be another element of an out of the time, you know, then you get the Borg Queen and another out of time element all jamming into this one time. I could see where you might say, that's just another thing to jam in there.
Well, but then if you don't want to raise expectations, don't cast the same actor.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that they did that. Yeah.
Same actor in a role that would fit very well with somebody, say, from the 29th century coming back to wanting to guide Picard in a way that they can do it a little under the table, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I see it. I mean, he's
a good actor, and I'm glad he's in here. I would have liked to have seen something more like that. That's another callback they could, even if it's a little bit of fan service. I would like to have seen it.
Yeah, it's also the other thing I was going to say. It's an Enterprise thing, which it's not impossible that they would bring it in, but yeah. All right, so let's talk about Raffi and Seven tracking Agnes, the Queen Agnes.
Okay.
We have them. They're outside the bar where Agnes created a to-do by breaking the window. And it's this interesting interaction between Raffi and Seven. So we have this romantic thing that they've decided to build between these characters. And
it's not working for them.
It's not, well, internally or externally, like either from inside the story, their relationship isn't working, but also just as a general, I don't think it works. But Raffi puts her foot in her mouth when she tells Seven to make like a Borg to track Agnes.
Oh, wow. Does Seven get mad at that?
Yeah. There's a bit of you just see me as a Borg, as a tool. She accuses Raffi of being a manipulator who needs to.
She says it.
Yeah.
You manipulate. Everyone has to be exactly what Raffi wants.
Yes. And we even get to see that. Yeah.
Because later, Raffi admits, yeah, I do that. I am a manipulator. And we flash back to her like a year or so ago when Elnor is still alive, and B is looking at going to he was planning to go to Starfleet Academy, but he's got word from the Qowat Milat that they need him on this other planet. And so his plan is put off the Academy for a year and go serve the Qowat Milat and do what he needs to there, and then come back. And Raffi guilts him into, and it's passive aggressive. It's like, okay, well, it's your life. You do what you want. But she guilts him into staying at Starfleet Academy. So he did, and he died. And that's part of what's driving her. That right now it's the guilt that she manipulated Elnor into staying at the Academy, and he died as a result.
Yes. Right. And so we have these two threads of their relationship here of you're a manipulator and I'm a former Borg, and that kind of that conflict. And in fact,
just a different kind of manipulator.
Yeah. And in fact, they trace this weird thing where so Queen Agnes went with this guy from the bar to kind of
have alone time.
Well, we get this thing that kind of builds off of what you said last time, Jimmy, which is the motivation is like addiction. She's looking for connection, and it was a connection that didn't satisfy. She had an intimate encounter with this guy, and then killed him.
So we saw this guy briefly. He never has any lines, but we saw him briefly at the end of the last episode. He was like shooting pool by himself, and he had a significant look at Agnes, and it's like, okay, on this series, anytime someone has a significant look, it's pointing to something in the future.
Yes.
And so in this episode, Seven talks to the bartender and says, so we're looking for this little blonde girl. And he's like, are you the police? And it's like, you don't want to deal with the police? And it's like, well, the people who come here aren't really looking for the police. And she says, well, we're not the police. She's my sister, and I'm so worried about her. And can you tell us anything about where she went? And she comes up on the spot with this plausible explanation that will satisfy the bartender. And this is her tweaking Raffi, because she's not doing anything Borg-like. She's using insight into human nature, to get the information out of the bartender. She's not thinking like a Borg. And the bartender says, well, there was this guy with the red beard, and she went with him, and she went up the street and then turned right. And so they go up the street, they turn right. It's an alley. They find the body of the guy.
Yeah.
And Seven deduces correctly that she was seeking a connection, and she was going to have an intimate encounter with this guy, but it didn't satisfy her, and she was so frustrated she killed him.
Right.
And then she ate his cell phone battery.
Yeah, because it's full of lithium ions. So that's your cell phone battery, is a lithium ion battery. And apparently metal ions act as stabilizers for nanites and newly assimilated people, which is new technobabble lore.
New lore.
Apparently. Yeah.
Yep.
And so she's out hunting down batteries. So we get this great shot of a line of cars with car batteries that have been eaten out of them.
She's been sucking on the car batteries to get the lithium ions out of them. It's like, okay, you do know you're in a human body right now, and that's kind of toxic. That much is kind of going to be kind of toxic to a human body.
Right.
Eating batteries are bad. Okay. Don't do it.
There should have been a disclaimer on the screen in this.
Do not suck car batteries.
Yeah. When they finally see her, she's got a little bit of the battery acid like on her chin or something like that, and it's just like, boy, those nanites are doing a good job keeping that body together, because if we tried to do that, our body would literally eat itself out.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And then they get their butts kicked by Agnes, who is now wearing combat boots, and
Agnes
them regularly.
Does a Darth Vader neck lift on Raffi.
Yes.
So she's holding Raffi up off the ground by her neck.
Yep.
And she's about to kill her, and then we hear Agnes's voice off screen say, "No,
Yeah.
And so we know there's an internal struggle going on within Agnes between the Queen and Agnes. And Raffi and Seven afterwards deduced that struggle must be going on. So they know Agnes is still in there somewhere.
Right.
Well, and they show it by Agnes's eyes going from pure black when she's controlling the Queen to back to natural coloring.
Right.
You know, so you see that kind of fade in and out as she's being controlled.
There's still good in her. I sense it.
Incidentally, they note in something of a nod to realism that they then exploit for plot purposes. They note that that Agnes is in a make do situation. These are not the standard materials and metals. And how do you digest the metals anyway? I guess the nanites do it for you, but these are imperfect metals that she's ingesting. They're not Borg quality. And so because of the imperfect metals, there will be imperfect assimilation. And that may be a big factor in why the Borg want to join the Federation. These are not standard Borg. They are imperfect by Borg standards. They are imperfectly assimilated. And so they're open to new possibilities like, let's join the Federation.
Sure.
Right. So, and that's kind of where we leave Raffi and Seven until the end of the episode, which when they reunited with Picard and Guinan.
Got a bunch of fun stuff with Cory and Adam Soong, though.
So first we have she's wearing a VR headset. So she's in the metaverse and she's exploring her dad's lab in the metaverse.
Yeah, she's looking for evidence that will explain her existence.
But she can't go to the lab personally for some reason. So
I think she's in the lab. She's just using the VR headset to try to identify possibly significant things.
Oh, well, she was standing in her living room there, but looking in the lab.
Okay. Yeah. I think they could have been a little clearer with that. But the thing that happens then is Q has left a simulacrum of himself, an interactive AI in the VR headset. And he shows her exactly what she needs to find in the lab. And he also explains that I forget if it's him or Adam that explains she is a clone. She was created by nuclear transfer, which is where you take out the nucleus of a cell and put it into another cell that has been denucleated. So it doesn't have a nucleus. So you put a new one in it and you will then allow the cell to start dividing. And so this is one of the techniques that will produce clones. The other technique that produces clones is artificial twinning, where you take an early zygote and pull it in two, and then they will both keep developing into identical twins.
Right. Yeah, it's Soong who actually eventually tells her. And it's kind of horrific, that scene where he tells her, the truth, like of her siblings, or prior clone incarnations. Yeah. He says the first dozen of her died in hours. First dozen. And then the next few in days. They died in days after birth. And then the one before her made it to 4. But
almost
to 4.
Yeah.
And it's just so horrifying, like how casually he talks about
he's
disposing of these children.
He's totally been timeless childing her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Also, we get an explanation for the names of all the daughters. I mean, because she encountered the names of the other daughters last episode, and they were all from Greek mythology. They were like Persephone and so forth, Prosperina, and she's realized all of them are daughters of Zeus.
Yes.
And so that makes Adam Soong see himself as Zeus, the king of the gods.
Yeah.
Well, and he even in the later talk where she's leaving, he says, you exist because I willed it. Well, that's language that we use in the church to talk about. We exist because God willed it.
Yeah. And
we continue to exist because he wills it.
Yeah. And he's very proud of himself. He says, anyone can procreate, but you exist because I willed it.
Oh, man. Talk about arrogant much.
God complex, definitely God complex going on there.
Yeah. Data, your lineage is really problematic. What did you say?
Data's like the odd man out. Everyone else in his lineage is terrible,
including his brother Lore.
Including his brother, yeah.
Well, think about it.
B4 is not so bad, but
yeah, but even B4 was damaged. It's like Data's the only thing in the Sung legacy that worked right.
Well, Picard seems to be working. He's technically now in the Soong lineage because of his body. Yeah.
So I was just horrified by that. But like how he casually explains this, but he tells her that he loves her, but she says, "No, you love your work." And in other words, I'm an object that you love, not a person. And that's a really key thing. And
his defense is, no, I love my work and I love you. And she tries to make him to force a choice between the two to reveal the truth to himself. And he kind of straddles it, which is, from the show's point of view, not the right answer. Right. But really, they would just be sticking with it. No, I can care about my career and I can care about you. That's like most people.
Right. Well, although I think what she's saying is you only care about me insofar as I am your legacy. I'm a thing that you've created, not so much as for myself.
Right. And the human thing to do would be to stick with your guns and say, no, I love you. I mean, yes, you're my legacy. Parents are proud of their children and want them to succeed in life, and children are a parent's legacy. But that doesn't stop them from loving the children from who they are.
Except he says, instead of doing that, he says, reality isn't real. It's what I make it. And you exist because I willed it.
And that's because he's delusional and has a God complex, and I'm not.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and then we get into how she never had a mother, which there must be some well, maybe there's artificial wombs in this timeline or something.
He told her stories about her mother, but now she knows none of them are true.
Yeah. So she was gestated somehow, of course, but
I thought they said something like that. She was gestated in like an artificial womb, or
I think maybe that's what it was.
There was just kind of a quick line about that.
Yeah.
So. And then as she's walking away,
and that's not at all improbable. I mean, we already have you should not do this.
Yes.
But we already have the ability in an artificial environment to take human embryos up to a certain stage. And then obviously we have the ability after they're developed to a certain point to take care of them. That's what an incubator is for a child. An incubator is a Mark I artificial womb. So and we've had those for decades. So all you need to do is find something that will bridge that intermediate period. And so we could, I don't know if
I've seen
could have them today, but if not, we will have artificial wombs for the entire 9 months very soon.
Yeah.
And it's given that they're letting Adam Soong have advanced tech that doesn't really exist in the real world. He could easily have an artificial womb. That is simple from a sci-fi technological perspective.
Right. And
right now, at least, you still need to have a surrogate mother of some for some period of time.
But to emphasize, that would be immoral.
Yes, absolutely.
Do not do this. Incubators on the far end of pregnancy, just fine.
Yes.
Artificial womb through the entirety of pregnancy, including in vitro fertilization, not fine.
Bad.
Exactly.
Bad. So as she's walking away, Soong, throws at her in classic, yelling at her, departing back, "You don't exist without me." And then she says, "Maybe it's you who don't exist without me," which is interesting. You are defined by, your legacy, who you are is defined by your work on me. Yeah. So maybe that's the lesson.
And she also talks like a teenage girl, explaining, "I'm going to freedom from you."
Yes. And
I'm surprised there wasn't the "you'll come crawling back, you'll be back."
But where's she going? She's never been in the world. She's just no shoes on.
She even kicked off her sandals. Yeah, it's like, okay, pavement gets hot in LA.
She obviously doesn't know that yet, but So that's when, in his depths, and he's deep in a bottle of something brown, Agnes shows up at Soong's, and she has the great line of, "I trust I don't have to give you the lecture on resistance is futile," or something. I assume a lecture on the futility of resistance is not going to be necessary. And he says, "Am I dreaming, or is this a nightmare?" And she says, "Ultimately, that's up to you." And that's where they have the this idea.
So she comes to the high-tech bachelor pad and says, give me the stuff I need to make nanites so I can assimilate people, and I'll leave the planet, and then you can become the father of Earth's future, which I've already seen. So you lose a daughter, but you become the godfather of a world.
Right. So she says if Rene Picard boards the Europa mission, she makes a discovery that renders Sung's work obsolete. So whatever it is, these microbes that she brings back renders all his genetic work unnecessary and obsolete, which has already been said to be unethical by the relevant authorities
and defunded and banned.
Yes. But if she doesn't, he becomes the great man who ushers in the fascist future that we see.
Right, because there's like an economic collapse or something, and they come to him for help in the wake of it.
Economic and ecological and all this other stuff is going to happen.
Yeah. Right, as we saw in the dystopian future, they have a shield around the planet to keep the ionosphere or something like that.
Which happens just look just like the one that Sung was using over Cory when she was outside.
Yep, that's right.
I just made that connection now.
So the interesting thing is that's a future in which the Borg have been destroyed. But if the Borg Agnes gets Sung's cooperation, she's going to take over La Sirena and prevent that future. So, or maybe not. It's kind of interesting because she's creating this future where the Borg are destroyed. So is that...
Well, she's creating a future which has him, I mean, assuming she's not just lying to him.
Yes.
She's creating a future that has him on Earth, and the galaxy is under Earth. A lot of the galaxy is under Terran control, but forewarned is forearmed. So presumably she is thinking, I will be, assuming she's not lying, she's thinking, well, I will know how to avoid what happened. So it won't be entirely the same as the future I came from.
So what created that future? That future was created by the one where the Borg are defeated. Was that created by Q? Messing with Renee?
That remains to be seen. Early on, Q denied causing the shift in the timeline.
Right.
The shift in the timeline was caused by destroying the Queen in the future. And that created the dystopian future. At least that's what Q was implying. Is this dystopian future happened because of your fear, because you killed that Queen instead of talking to her about joining the Federation. And then within the dystopian future, the Borg have been destroyed because of human expansion into the galaxy. But the Queen is presumably thinking, I'm going to do something different, and that'll stop that part of that future from happening.
Okay. So then we have the first drones being assimilated. And these are ex-special forces of something called the Spearhead Operation or something like that, which we heard about previously. Spearhead Operations is a military contractor who had Sung had partnered with them to conduct genetic experiments on them.
Yep.
That was what.
So these are super soldiers, very likely.
Yes, they're all Captain America. We just put it another way.
Or Khan.
Yep. And then we have the third
the Rios subplot.
Which is not much to it. Like you mentioned, Rios and Teresa and her son are aboard the La Sirena. He's showing them around, showing them how the replicator works.
Oh, and it's like, so you know how kids will take dolls and make them kiss by smashing their faces together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This felt like the writers doing that because they've been having Teresa be really cold towards Crystal Ball in the last few episodes. Ever since she showed up again, she's been on edge with him, and he's been subtly conveying he's interested in her, and then not so subtly. Yes. Well, in this episode, they're just taking Barbie and Ken and smashing their faces together because they get on the ship, the little boy is running around doing stuff, and Teresa and Rios are having a conversation, and Teresa is like, okay, she wants him to open up and tell her about himself. And the way she does it is so on the nose.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so pretend that you and I have been married for 10 years. And we've just gone on this date and blah, blah, blah. And she's spinning this elaborate conversation marriage fantasy with him and says, and then you tell me something that I've never known about you for 10 years. What is it? And it's like,
is a bizarre conversation.
You just spun an elaborate marriage fantasy conversation scenario. I don't know how to answer that question.
So do you do this with all your Tinder dates or something? It's really weird.
And it's this super intimate fantasy truth thing. And wow, okay, suddenly she's very aggressive.
Yeah.
And then they kiss.
Yeah. And then he tells her that he loves her, basically, that he's falling in love with her.
Yeah.
That's his secret. Yeah.
The secret was the moment I fell in love with you was, and then they get interrupted.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I do have to say that the most realistic part of this was if you give a kid a replicator, the first thing he's going to replicate is a bunch of cake.
Yeah. Cake or candy or something like that.
Yeah. That's
not just chicken soup.
No, not a PB&J. So, and that's all we really see them, apart from the discovering that the transporters are offline because of the Borg code in it. That was the other thing.
And they have a plan to deal with that. They're going to go back to Supervisor Talon and use her transporter to get around.
Right, right. So that's the thing is Rafi and Seven and Picard have reunited at the 10 Forward Ave bar. Presumably Guinan is now done. I mean, she kind of says goodbye to them. So that's, I'm going to guess that we won't see her in the last two episodes here, at least Guinan anyway. Their idea is to go get Talon's transporter, because Talon has been absent of this entire episode. And I found that was kind of odd. Like after all of that from the last episode where, exploring Picard's mind, Talon is gone. Nothing about that. It looks like, based on the previews, that the next episode we'll get back to that. But it was just kind of this weird, like, we're just going to drop that for a whole episode, and Talon and everything, all of that.
Yeah. That's okay. And really, this is a 10-hour or 7-hour movie.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a problem with them dropping Talon because they needed to focus on these other plot elements.
Right. Mm-hmm. And they're going to need to somehow deal with the special forces who've been assimilated to who are going to be trying to take the La Serena, which I guess like it's not going to be enough.
I've seen previews where, they're in control. But obviously they will cease to be in control at some point. Next episode is called Hide and Seek.
Yeah.
And so we can expect a kind of cat and mouse game for the fate of La Serena.
I think it also is going to have something to do with Picard's mom as well, the hide and seek element. So there'll be a little of both.
Could be.
So any last notes on this episode before we get to our feedback, Father Cory?
I love Q's insult to Guinan when he first sees her. And you're that multi-celled, sanctimonious, droning shrew. I love that multi-cell was an insult.
Yes. Anything else?
So, Father?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've just been thinking about all the plot lines we've got to tie up in the next two episodes. And I hope they tie some of them up in episode 9, because the episode 10 will need to breathe.
Yeah.
You're going to need a significant post-climax denouement in order to pay off the emotional energy. We have to go back to the Shire. Now, we don't need to spend 40 minutes in the Shire.
Right.
But after the Shire has been saved, we need to spend some time in it so we can appreciate what's been saved. And so you don't want a Star Trek Voyager-like ending where you see the promised land cut to black.
Right.
So we need to find out what's missing with Picard's mother, because they said there's something else that's relevant. So we need to find out what's the missing information about Picard's mother. What is going on with Q? Why is Q around what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We need to deal with what happens if we now don't kill the Borg Queen.
Right.
We need to find out what's going to happen with Picard's relationship with Laris.
Yep.
And we need to at least gesture at the fates of the other characters, like what's going to happen with Seven and Rafi in the future. What's going to happen? We need more on Elnor. We need the Elnor plotline resolved. He needs to come back. We need to know what happens with Crystal Ball, Teresa, and their son. Do they come to the future, or does he stay in the 21st century? But something's got to be resolved there. And how do we defeat the Queen? With Queen Agnes, or exactly what happens with her.
And what happens with Adam Sung, too.
And Adam Sung and Cory.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of plot lines dangling, and we're going to need a lot of resolutions in the next 2 episodes. And I hope they spread them between the 2 episodes so that it's not all crammed into the last one with no time to breathe.
Right.
Yeah. All that in about an hour and a half to 2 hours total airtime.
That's a lot to do, because then we've got to have this re-confrontation with the masked queen on the bridge of the Stargazer that has to resolve itself, and then after.
And all of this is supposed to be about teaching Picard some kind of lesson. So we need to, it's like, what's Picard's character arc in this? What's the lesson he needs to learn from all this?
I think it's going to end up being Picard and Laris. To me, the only question is does Pinocchio become a real boy? I wonder if that's Q's parting gift to
I assume
Picard.
He's fully functional.
Yes. But but is he still going to be a robot, or can we bring him back to life?
That would be nice, but I don't think they will.
I have a prediction, perhaps feeling that this is Q's farewell.
Final. Yep.
Yeah. He is going to die, and I think that's actually what he's going to do. Is now that I think about it, is as he goes, he's going to grant Picard, that his final wish of making him a real boy, sort of again.
That would be nice, but I don't know that they're going to do that.
I know. I kind of wish.
I think they like the fact that Picard is a robot now.
They keep bringing it up in positive
Picard.
ways. So
yeah. All right. So. Let's get to our feedback, our listener feedback. Our first feedback comes from John Gilchrist via email, who says, I have a rough theory that the Q Continuum, the Elorians, and the Watchers are all part of a larger, albeit fractured, contingent which ensures humanity and or the galaxy stays on a predetermined course. The Watchers watch different significant people on different planets, but don't interfere. The Elorians are assigned to planets to listen and observe, and the Q are hands-on and may manipulate events by most any means. Q is assigned to humanity, and Picard in particular, because of Picard's vast importance to human and galactic history. At first, Q begrudges his assignment to humanity and Picard, as seen throughout each series he appears. However, I think he's since come to admire Picard and humanity in ways he will not, at least not, has yet to, admit. Something is going wrong in the predetermined course of events Q has been assigned to protect, and this results in Q's current instability and lost power. For Q, it is a race to get things back on track before the fate of the galaxy falls apart, and he and anyone else is powerless to fix it. So, I don't know if that still fits now that we know that Q's real problem is that he's dying. But I just don't feel like it fits that the Q would be part of something bigger. That working with others.
I think it's kind of stretching in general. I don't see that the Watchers and the Elorians have to be even connected in any way.
Yeah, they
just get to be have similar powers, but that doesn't mean that they have to be. In that the Elorians are taking a position of that Guinan is actually on Earth to be a listener to what's going on, because that doesn't as I recall. It's been a while since I've seen Time's Arrow, the episode where she's back in San Francisco. I don't recall that being a part of it. She was there just to have fun.
Yeah,
just if I remember.
There's nothing about she's on a mission in Time's Arrow. She's just there. And you could explain that in any number of ways. I think it's true that Q has grown to respect and appreciate Picard. That's definitely true. Q is not in the same position with respect to Picard that he was at Encounter in Farpoint.
Right.
In Encounter at Farpoint. So there's definitely a bond there that Q appreciates way more than Picard does. But And exactly how they pay that out, we'll have to see. We know so little about the supervisors people that I don't know how they fit into the picture, but they seem to be on a technological level that's equivalent to Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem to be, super more advanced. The Elarians also don't seem to be super more advanced, though they obviously have some abilities that allow them to maybe hold their own in a fight with, I put it this way. So I think the Elarians are kind of like North Korea. We could the U.S. could totally stomp North Korea if we chose to. Militarily, there's just no way they could survive a full-on onslaught from the U.S. But they've got nukes,
right?
And we don't want to get into a nuclear war if we don't have to. And so I think that kind of describes the relationship between the Elarians and the Q continuum. The Elarians are enough that they could do damage to the Q continuum if they had to. But I think the Q could ultimately stomp the Elarians.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So our next feedback comes from Hot Glue Gunslinger on Patreon, who says, so you mentioned in your review of Monsters that Guinan was unlikely to have the one bottle of the Q peace treaty. In my headcanon, I imagine it like this. The Elarians captured this moment in a bottle, a full bottle. But in this episode, we see that when Guinan summoned a Q, she poured out little more than a single shot. In my headcanon, I'm guessing that this exchange between the Elarians filled an entire bottle, and it was redistributed to many smaller bottles and given to those Elarians at the highest levels. Ergo, Guinan has this particular bottle, but not the one bottle. So,
sure, that would explain it. That's a acceptable headcanon.
Yeah, that's acceptable. It'll work.
Almost any headcanon is acceptable, but that one would explain it.
As long as it doesn't contradict known canon, that's fine. Good, thank you.
But by the way, Jimmy, you accidentally said Encounter Farpoint and corrected yourself on Encounter at Farpoint. The title Encounter Farpoint sounds so much more dramatic and exciting an episode than the episode actually was.
That would be a better episode. All right, let's wrap things up. We want to take a moment.
Also, it's like, what's with Farpoint? Why would you even call yourself that?
Farpoint.
I mean, that's Farpoint is. Think about the branding committee meeting that they had to decide we're going to call ourselves Farpoint Station. It's like, yeah, that'll encourage people to go there if you emphasize how far away it is from them.
Yeah, kind of like Deep Space Nine, sitting around a planet.
Yeah, right. Deep space from what? It's not deep space from Bajor.
Yeah.
Anyways.
All right. Let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Aaron B., Mark S., Karen V., Brett A., and Elizabeth K. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of Star Trek Picard Mercy. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/starquestmedia, or you can send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Picard called Hide and Seek. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Well, thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and resistance is futile. I mean, live long and prosper.
And thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, the trap is immaterial. It's the escape that counts.